United South Broadway Corporation, promoting community building, youth development, fair housing, and fair lending in New Mexico since 1986. We work with community advocates in 6 key areas: fair housing and fair lending, crime prevention, financial literacy, locally based commercial development, and opportunities for youth. USBC offers free HUD-certified housing, counseling, and legal services to homeowners statewide facing mortgage delinquency or foreclosure. And we offer anti-racism trainings for policymakers. Welcome to United South Broadway Corporation.
So Diana, I wanted to ask about the United South Broadway as an advocacy organization and does advocacy with the legislature and on all these issues that we've been talking about. So I'd like to hear some more about that.
Well, just as we said, housing is very racialized. It's also very political because It's a costly venture. Housing can be, and it takes public policy to produce affordable housing. So it's important that we stay involved from a number of reasons. First of all, we do mortgage work. Mortgage work is very complicated. If you remember, if you've ever bought a home, if you've ever recall going back when you did your closing, you had a stack of papers this thick, and there were probably 10 or 15 players that all came together over a period of time to get you in that chair to sign documents. So it's complicated. And it's important that we, as an organization that does housing, make sure that the housing market is vibrant and accessible to particularly low-income communities that are seeking access to credit and capital. And so we have always looked at lending practices. Early on, we actually looked at bank mergers that were happening in the 80s, and we had our share of those mergers here in this community. Mm-hmm. And that's a time when, under the Community Reinvestment Act, the Congressional Act of 1977, that says banks must lend money in their delineated service areas. So that really comes to bear when banks are being merged and purchased by other banks. What will that bank do? Will they move out? Will they close that branch? What will happen to the servicing for that community? And so that's a time when you can actually do bank challenges under the Community Reinvestment Act. And so our group would come forward, and it wasn't necessarily United South Broadway. We would come together as a coalition of different groups and individuals, and we formed something called the CARE Coalition. Now, I couldn't tell you today what that stands for, that acronym, but Community Reinvestment something, okay?
Okay.
I think it was called the Credit or CARE, one or the other. But anyway, that was the vehicle in which we began to challenge bank mergers. And when you challenge bank mergers, you can also come up with community agreements. And so always we would look, how is this bank going to put money aside for small business and for home ownership? So that's policy work. And then as you look at mortgages, well, this country had a major crash in the mortgage industry. And it was virtually around fraud in many ways, and lack of education on the part of a homeowner, understanding what they were signing and what they were being lured into. And so on the loan origination side, when you first start the process of owning a home, loan origination, we had to make sure that rates are affordable rates, that they're not predatory rates, that the practices, how they looked at the credit and qualified people, that's all called loan origination. And so we worked on the front end of that, and because there were so many abuses, we were able to come up with a law, the New Mexico Home Loan Protection Act. And we worked with Center for Responsible Lending out of North Carolina because they were expert. They'd been looking at us anyway because they had heard about us challenging these bank mergers, and they kind of have radars and look around the country. Where's a good place for us to go and put some consumer protections in place? And who has a ready market of people ready to do that? Well, we were one of them. So when we called them, it was like, yeah, we've been waiting on this call. So we were able to bring them here. It was a major movement. As a matter of fact, it closed down the legislature. The important thing is that you have a good sponsor in the Senate. It's industry bill, and basically we're saying we're gonna put a check on these lending institutions that they cannot do certain things. There was a concept called equity stripping, where they would take a home and refinance it, and they would wipe out all the equity paying this and fees and services. And they may pay something for the homeowner, some back debt or something like that, but pretty much it just wasn't an equitable process. A lot of money was stripped out of that person's mortgage. Equity was stripped out of that loan through fees. That didn't go in their pocket. And so one of the things that came out of that was you had to have a net tangible benefit to the borrower if you were going to refinance and start taking equity out. And that became part of the Dodd-Frank Act, the federal act that says you must have a net tangible benefit. That act stood up in a lawsuit, in a local lawsuit with the Bank of New York, if I'm not mistaken.
Right,
The Romero case, where they charged, that was one of the defenses in that case, that they did not have a net tangible benefit. And that was, it was a huge shift in the industry. And it was taking place around this country. But everyone that came to Albuquerque, to New Mexico, every lobbyist in the country came here. They said, this is bellwether time, okay? If this takes place in New Mexico, all heck's gonna break out. So it did take place, but it was a hard fought act. We had to do a lot of community organizing and working with a lot of groups. So it was myself, Raynell Zuni, Vanjie Gabaldon, and Vicki Plevin, 4 women that did this. And we were up in Santa Fe all the time, working with legislators, working with our sponsors, and we finally got that bill. But the day it came to a vote, it got to the Senate floor. There were not enough people to vote. Democrats had left, Republicans had left. Nobody wanted to vote on that bill. Even though they said in committees they were going to do it, we'd gone through all these little talks and tweaked our bill and did everything we could do, and we finally had a deal when it got to the Senate floor. So what they did, our sponsor, who had a lot of clout, he shut the Senate down and did a call of the Senate. That means that he's going to do roll call. Everybody's got to be in their seat. If you're not there, then he sends the state police out to pick you up, wherever you are. You get a call, the state police is coming to pick you up. So we had people that were gone home for lunch. We'd had people that were teaching a class at UNM. They were just all over at their businesses. Well, they all got a little tap on the shoulder and said, you're needed in the Senate, okay? And they got a state police ride to sit in there to escort you literally into your chair because it's a call of the Senate. Now, naive me, we get off the elevator at the Roundhouse and everybody's pandemonium's everywhere. Like, people are screaming, hollering. And I look at my friend Vicki and said, what are they talking about? They said the Senate has closed down because of our bill. Wow. The senator has put a call of the Senate. It was high drama. And it was a 50-50 vote. Now that was really good. I mean, we really had a big win because we probably should have, these senators from across the state, they were not eager to take on that industry. They get a lot of money from that industry and protections. And some of them are bank board members and stuff that sit on these committees, and powerful committees. And so the pressure was there because we put AARP to work. We put all these community groups across the state to call their senator, 25 calls every day. Make sure you call them, harass them about this bill. You want this bill for protection. And had a 50-50 vote. Diane Dinish, a Democrat, was the lieutenant governor. She broke the tie. And we had the Home Loan Protection Act. So it's the best thing going. We won a national award for it with Center for Responsible Lending. We made presentations in Washington, D.C. and New York City about what we did. We were trying to do payday lending at the same time during that whole legislative process. Right. But it was real clear to us after about we were in a long session, but after a couple of weeks, we realized this legislature is not buying this whole thing around payday lending. And the other thing is that payday lending is highly financed by a lot of people who we think wouldn't be financing it, and they are, okay? And so we said, when we would go into committees, they would say, well, really, isn't that just, that's what people need? They need access to this kind of money. Well, what happened to banks making small loans?
Right.
Banks used to make small loans, but now their predatory loans are made out of a retail storefront. But we realized we had to make a choice. And during that session, we either have to go where we feel we had some momentum, or do we keep hitting our heads against this brick wall? That may be, I think one senator said something, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. I said, yeah, but it could be a freight train coming your way. And that's not the light you want to see at the end of a tunnel, okay? But so we dropped the payday movement and we focused strictly on mortgage lending. the mortgage process. And we were able to really bring a piece of legislation that stands to this day. So it doesn't matter what kind of mortgage instrument you use, because mortgages are initiated all over the country. They're for New Mexico. They're initiated in other parts of the country because the underwriting is taking place and banks are so out there in different mortgage companies.
Yeah,
but if it
local
is in
anymore.
New Mexico, it doesn't matter whether you use a deed of trust or a traditional mortgage. The bottom of that document, there's a legend that says, in the case of New Mexico, you will use the Home Loan Protection Act. That's the process. So in New Mexico, we have a due process. We have a judicial process for foreclosure. Not every state has that. That means that you cannot have your home taken away from you unless you have a day in court. But that also means that the bank's gonna sue you, okay? They're gonna come and serve you with papers, and you're gonna have to respond in 30 days with an answer to that. And so that you can weigh in and say, that's my property, and I need to know everything that's going on with it while it's going through that process. Well, then we saw, how are people, this is great. How are people gonna, do when they get served? Because we were doing housing counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing a presentation one day, and an attorney, Mr. Eddie Benavides, he heard our presentation about banking. And he came up to us afterwards and said, "Do you guys have any attorneys?" We said, "No." He said, "Well, I just got put on a commission for the Civil Legal Service Commission. Here's the RFP, write it and turn it in by such and such time." And we did. And we've had legal services to offer homeowners since 2004. So we've created this one-stop shop for foreclosure defense. And because we were the only one doing it, so our organization did a lot of things around housing before, our housing work is pretty much steeped in foreclosure defense.
Right.
Those kind of consumer protections.
Okay, so that's
we
how
have
that
a
evolved.
one-stop shop for housing counseling as well as legal defense for people who are income eligible. And we have worked with the courts to come up with mediation programs so that homeowners can have a chance to negotiate even deeper around keeping their homes. Because keeping a home in New Mexico is good for New Mexico. That's a tax base.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a just thing to do because we have a lot of low-income tax homeowners in New Mexico per capita than other states. That could really have let's face it, where do we fall in poverty on the ranking? We're always in the bottom 5 in terms of rates of poverty. And if we were to lose homes for low-income, for people who are considered in poverty, if they were to lose their home, what would happen to our state? It'd even be a more dire situation.
Yeah.
So we believe that we have to save.
51.
Yeah, we have to save homes wherever we can, and keep people out of the ranks of the homeless. So policy work is important, and then we went on to start looking at broker work, how brokers operate, because the banking industry began to change. You don't go to your local bank to get a loan anymore. There's a broker out there,
Right.
And they broker your loan around, okay? So
could be anyone.
And some people were doing it in the back of their cars, as we know, that they had broker business in the back of their trunk of their car, working out in the parking lot of Walmart or something, and taking applications and that kind of stuff, and abuses. And so we had to work with the state of New Mexico to begin to put constraints and protections in place, laws in place to, again, protect the consumer.
So that was the Loan Origination Licensing Act. They had to conform to, there had to be some standards
about how they were going to operate and how they would disclose to homeowners, and conduct their businesses and be licensed. How about that?
Yeah, everyone else has to be licensed no matter what.
As a nonprofit, we got to have a license, so to speak, right?
Right, we do. So certainly mortgage brokers, since they're handling such huge transactions.
An important asset to families.
So that's how we've ended up in the work that all of us are doing right now, which is trying to keep people in their homes, save homes,
and being responsive to the needs of community people as they see them and as they articulate them. So someone could walk in the door today from this neighborhood or other neighborhood around here and say, this is a problem that me and my neighbors and others are experiencing, and we're obligated, in my opinion, to at least look into it and say, yeah, it is a legitimate problem. How do we work together to resolve this issue? Or let me just tell you more about how this works. And so they have a better understanding. So because we've been given a privileged space in this neighborhood, I think, we have a voice, you know, and even if we, even from a neighborhood standpoint, our organization can convene meetings just like any other neighborhood association, maybe even broader, because our tentacles go much further than just South Broadway. So it's rewarding work, it's challenging, but we have a huge level of responsibility, I think, in terms of our responsibility to being responsive to community needs. So I like to say we're kind of organic. We move and change as the need becomes necessary, but at the same time, keeping a deep understanding of what our capacity is. So it shouldn't be, we're doing this today and tomorrow we're gonna go do this. It should be a natural progression. And if we're doing our work right, it is a natural progression.
And it's all centered around neighborhoods and housing. There is a coherence.
Yeah, and I like to use the term
philosophy.
neighborhood because that's that smaller component. When we go, then we become the community, you know, and then it goes broader. But there is that thing of working neighborhood by neighborhood that starts to build to a community picture.
Well, thank you, Diana. This has been a great education. And is there anything else you'd like to add before we close? That's pretty much what I had.
No, I think the biggest challenge we always have is, and it's not really a challenge. I guess we're in some way it's a blessing because people that come to work for United South Broadway tend to be attracted to what we do. So it's not because, well, I just got to make a living. Yes, I can make a living, but at the same time, I can fulfill my own personal commitment to doing social kind of work and giving a contribution to the community. And those are the type of people that tend to attract to United South Broadway, which makes my life so much easier.